Hi folks, Buckley here. This is workshop number 22 in MEEG104. Today we're going to be talking about technical presentations. This is the second part of a two-part series on technical presentations. Before we get going though, a couple things. Formative assignments number 21 from last time is due Wednesday, May 6th at 2 p.m. Number 22, which will be the formative assignment associated with this workshop, and surprise, your last formative assignment of the semester, will be due Monday, May 11th. Required reading from last time was the chapter on presentations in your textbook, 112 in the 4th edition, 111 in the 3rd, 110 in the 2nd. Summative assignment is being graded as we speak. We're moving through those, and we're excited about them. They're looking pretty good, so we'll have those drafts back to you hopefully by Monday. Next Monday you should have those drafts. Live help, optional discussion sections with me. Love to see you guys Mondays and Wednesdays, 3 to 3:30, and TA office hours are also available. In this workshop, we're going to be talking about the stylistic elements of technical presentations. And spoiler here, I hate on Question Man quite a lot. So if you like Question Man, we need to discuss. Please come to the discussion section and we can debate Question Man. But I personally think he's highly pointless and very annoying. So more on that coming. All right. Just a reminder that your final presentation for most of you who are in MEEG102 is going to be on Thursday, May 14th during regular class time, which is 9:30 to 10:45 a.m. Again, this applies to most everybody in the class, with a few exceptions of people who are not concurrently enrolled in MEEG102. You and your team, for those who are enrolled in MEEG102, you and your team are going to give a PowerPoint slide presentation via Zoom. It'll be a 10-minute presentation with 3 minutes of question and answer and a 2-minute changeover period. We are spending these two lectures, so this last lecture that we did and then this one today in MEEG104, focused on getting you ready for this presentation next week in this other class. The audience in MEEG102 will be several evaluators and your classmates. Okay, so you're also going to be critiquing the presentations of your classmates and providing with them with some feedback. Okay, so these are useful lectures not only in this class, in technical communications, but also in MEEG102, where you're going to have your final design presentation next week. All right, let's start today, part 2 of 2 on technical presentations. Our learning objectives for today are to apply common elements of style to create really high quality technical presentations. This is a subject that I am super excited about. I feel that one of my own personal strengths is in creating presentations that are pretty clear. Okay, so I'd like to share my techniques with you and make sure that you develop your own style and become a PowerPoint ninja. All right, you're going to critique others' presentations on these elements of style. And the third thing we're going to do is use common software, specifically Microsoft PowerPoint, which is what I'm using here and I've been using throughout the semester, to create technical presentations that meet the content guidelines that we talked about in part 1 and also the style guidelines that we're going to talk about today. So there will be a separate video on using Microsoft PowerPoint where I'll show you a couple tips and tricks to make your presentations as clean and as stylistically sophisticated as what I'm using in classes. All right, before we get going though, I want you to think about a recent presentation that you gave yourself. So from our last discussion section, I heard from some people that you do have some experience with PowerPoint. It's pretty varied. Okay, so some people have none, some people have just a little bit of experience, maybe from high school, and other people have used PowerPoint fairly extensively. But I want you to think about a slide presentation that you gave in PowerPoint if you have done that. If you haven't, I want you to think about a presentation that you've witnessed, perhaps not from my classes. So think about another presentation that you've witnessed. Okay, and I want you to think about the following points. What was the setting and the goal of that presentation? I want you to describe the formatting that was used in the presentation, thinking specifically about the layout of information on the page, type of text, background, all of that. And then, did the formatting of the presentation enhance or detract from the presentation itself? So thinking about how the information was actually conveyed on the screen to you as an audience member, or if you were presenting, what formatting decisions did you make, and did those enhance or detract from your presentation? Think about this for a second and jot down some ideas. Okay, So for most people creating their own presentation for the first time, I would say that it's going to look something like this. And I have to be honest that being a consumer of quite a number of technical presentations from my colleagues, from other people in the field who are doing work, and then also, interacting with businesses and seeing some of their presentations from engineers in the field or business people in the field, I would say that there's kind of a typical presentation that you're seeing that honestly isn't very good. Okay, so we're going to focus on doing better than what I'm showing you right now. So we'll call this a typical presentation by John Public here, a principal engineer at any firm incorporated. All right. What you'll first notice is that they're using a template. So this border here is a standard PowerPoint border. There are a million of them that are available. They all are equally cheesy. Okay, and what they do is they actually take up valuable real estate on your slide, and we'll talk about that in a second. They also convey almost instantly that you are using a template, right? That you don't have your own style that you're using, that you're just pulling from a template. The next thing that I see in a lot of talks is an outline slide, right? And we'll get into why this isn't such a great idea in just a second. But typically they're going to tell you what's coming up in their slide. And this slide here, from a style perspective, is also incredibly empty, right? It lacks information density. And then somewhere in there, they're going to slap you with as much information as possible. So a lot of times what you see is slides that are almost empty. You see this stupid border. You see slides that are almost empty. And then you see slides that have way too much information. So here we have 3 bullet points and 2 images here, right? And this is a lot of text that instantly, you as an audience member, if you were listening to this presentation, this is a lot to absorb at once. Chances are that the presenter would not be able to get through this content in about 30 or about 60 seconds, which is our recommended slide time. And also it's way too much. Okay, so thinking about this type of presentation, which is pretty typical of what you see, the study goal. Okay, so this was a presentation. If you look at the content, basically they're presenting an alternative production schedule to managers. So this would be a presentation that perhaps an engineer is giving to management about production of a product. The formatting is stock. Okay, so this is a stock PowerPoint template and slide layouts. Again, that looks pretty amateurish. And then there's a lot of violations of the rule of thumb for slide content. Okay, so especially something like that introduction slide has way too much content, and then you really don't have enough density here, enough information being conveyed on the outline slide to justify its existence. All right, so overall, I would say that the formatting distracts from the overall study goal and those goals that we're trying to achieve with our presentation, right? So number one is making sure that we're getting our content across to the audience. Second is instilling some bit of confidence, and third is enthusiasm. I'm not getting any of that from this, right? It's detracting from it. Okay, so we're going to focus on doing better. Okay, before we get into that though, I want to showcase another type of presentation you have perhaps seen, and I've got to be honest, we as professors, as a profession, are horribly guilty of doing this to you. So I apologize on behalf of my profession here that you have probably experienced slides that look something like this, okay, which is pretty much the most boring use of PowerPoint on the planet. You might as well write out a document. Okay, so here are some slides. I think I've shown some clippings from this before. This is what the CAD class used to look like. Okay, so a slide on the introducing a concept. Here's some information on engineering drawings. Again, way too much in terms of content. It's also super boring, right? So if I flip back through these, imagine sitting through 75 minutes of this. Perhaps you don't need to imagine, and you are experiencing it, and I am sorry. I would never do that to you. So, okay, so let's critique these for a second. So the study goal with these slides is to help you learn about a concept. In this case, it's engineering drawings. The formatting is clean, right? So there's nothing distracting. There's no distracting backgrounds. The text choice is reasonable, but it's really monotonous, right? So even just 3 slides of this, I'm already starting to fall asleep. Okay, so the other problem here is that there's just way too much content. So it's basically reading as an outline of somebody's lecture notes rather than a presentation, right? So enhance or detract, it really detracts. You're bored out of your mind, right? This is not a way to communicate information to you, and I apologize again if you were experiencing this in a lot of classes. Okay, so let's bring up another point here, and I've been sort of hinting at it, which is your presentation goals. So we had 3 goals that we talked about from last time. Those goals are either enhanced or they're undermined by your choice of slide formatting. And that's why we're going to spend an entire lecture talking about formatting decisions that you're making in your presentations. Because, okay, so let's look at goal number 1, audience comprehending your key points. Let's go back to this. What are the key points on something like this, okay? Let's look at this one. This is even worse, right? I mean, you know, I can kind of get at it maybe from these first bullet points here, but is legal documentation really of the same weight as the UD Machine Shop homepage? I don't know, right? This doesn't make sense. Okay, so first point, you know, comprehending your key points. Your choice of formatting, your choice of organization of information on the page really does either help or hinder your audience understand what you're talking about. Second goal, making sure that the audience has confidence in your expertise. So you are going to have confidence in what I'm saying. The graphical choices that I'm making and displaying to you are going to affect whether or not you trust me. So if I have some cheesy looking Microsoft PowerPoint template background, okay, with crayon font, okay, you're going to trust me less as an engineer over me having very clear slides with readable text that are standard formatting for technical decisions. Third is enthusiasm. So probably the biggest thing, you know, that was a problem with a lot of the content you're consuming as lectures is it doesn't convey enthusiasm for the topic. Nobody is enthusiastic about reading somebody's lecture notes slapped onto slides. Okay, so same thing happens with your talks. Okay, the more visual interest you can put in there, the more enthusiasm naturally comes across to your audience. Okay, so I'd like to introduce 6 elements of style that you're going to be working with to ensure that your slide formatting will enhance your presentation goals. Okay, my goal is to make sure that you, maybe by the end of this class, but definitely by the end of your time here at University of Delaware Mechanical Engineering, have a style that you are using in PowerPoint that works to enhance those 3 common goals that you're shooting for in technical presentations. I obviously use a very consistent style across all of my lectures. I will tell you that that has varied across the years. I look back at some of how I used to lecture or some of my former presentation standards, and just like bad haircuts, they feel kind of awkward to me now. You get better over time and you develop a style that works for you. I'm going to introduce my style, and you can deviate from that slightly, okay? But I will tell you that this style will make you look like a ninja, all right? A total PowerPoint ninja, and will be very impressive to use, not only in this class, but in future classes as well. All right, so enough ado, let's talk about these elements of style. The first is making sure that every slide that you are using has a purpose. The second is putting content on that slide in a way that advances the narrative that you're actually trying to deliver, okay? Third is making a conscious choice about the font that you're using and also the background that you're using for PowerPoint. Fourth is having different slide layouts to reduce the monotony, so you don't want the same slide layout over and over and over again. Fifth is using animation in a thoughtful way. Me pulling up each of these bullet points is actually an example of animation. And the 6th is using mixed media whenever possible, and we'll talk about what that means. So let's go through each of these elements of style one by one. Let's start with every slide must have a purpose, okay? No filler slides. So there should be no slides up there that basically have so little information that you can't simply say what's going on, okay? Or they have graphs, images, or text that is completely superfluous, right? It's something that doesn't even need to be mentioned. So everything on there has to be essential. There are 2 major violations of this element of style. The first is the outline slide. I hate the outline slide. I know when I'm listening to you as a speaker that you are going to introduce me to the topic, you're going to present some details, and then you're going to present some conclusions. That's exactly how every narrative works, right? That's how movies work, that's how books work, that's how presentations work. You don't need to tell me that you are going to introduce me to the topic, you are going to present some sort of detailed analysis, and then you are going to draw some conclusions. You can just say that if you really feel like you need to introduce that framework to the audience, but in most part, it's not necessary at all. Okay, you simply just start your presentation. So the outline slide is completely useless. Please don't put one in. The other thing that is a filler slide is the question slide. And here is where I'm going to rant about Question Man. Question Man is the most useless graphical image I have ever seen. Okay, when you get to the end of the talk, there is almost always a question and answer period. So there is no need to slap a slide up that says questions, question mark, generally with Question Man. All of that is just useless, and it also conveys a certain level of amateurism. I don't know why everybody loves Question Man and they've been putting them in stuff. I hate Question Man. It makes my skin crawl. Question Man must die, okay? He needs to go the way of that annoying paperclip that used to be on some of the Microsoft packages that would suggest hints to you that were useless. Question Man, no, just no Question Man, okay? What you should do is end with an acknowledgement slide, okay? So there is information that's helpful to convey at the end of a presentation. It looks like this, okay? So this would be an appropriate last slide in a presentation. This is actually a standard slide that I use with a lot of my collaborators. Okay, so this is actually from a presentation I gave last year at a major conference. Okay, acknowledgement slide. It says acknowledgement, so it says, hello everybody, this is who I would like to thank. Okay, you don't have to walk people through the acknowledgement slide. Typically what you say is, I would now like to acknowledge my co-authors and my funding sources. Here is my contact information. You literally say just that. I would like to acknowledge my co-authors, my funding sources. Here is my contact information. And what the audience can read if they're interested is, these are your co-authors, or in your case, your teammates who would not be presenting. That's an important fact. If your teammates are presenting with you, you don't have to put them on the acknowledgement slide, okay? They are also presenters, so you would just end without this information. If there are people individually that you would like to thank for their help, you could put their names there as well, okay? But your teammates, if they are presenting with you, you typically don't say, I would now like to thank my co-authors or my teammates, because they are part of the talk as well. The other part is, usually here it's good to remind everybody of your affiliation, okay? So this is a bit of bragging. Obviously you're standing up, you're representing the University of Delaware. You would like to say that again, so feel free to pull the UD logo, or even better, the UD Mechanical Engineering logo, okay? Funding sources, this is something that if you are working on a project where somebody has given you money or resources, you would say something about that. So my educational work is funded by the National Science Foundation. Okay, so I would acknowledge that there. And then another nice thing to do is to actually provide your contact information. So your audience, if you're presenting to an audience that doesn't know you, may not remember your name at this point, right? So it was on the title slide, but it's not like they're being reminded of it. So saying, hello again, my name is such and such. Okay, you don't need to say that, but you would show it on your slide and list your contact information. Okay, so this is the appropriate way to end a presentation, any kind of presentation. Obviously, you would want to tailor this to whatever, for a design presentation in 102, you might acknowledge your teaching assistants who helped you out, okay, if there's a particular teaching assistant who helped, or if we were working in the studio, maybe a design studio TA or Mr. Ricketts, okay, you would show, maybe list your teammates and their email addresses and give your group name again. That's also appropriate. Okay, so use this instead of the stupid question slide with Question Man, okay? Question Man, again, must die. All right, second element of style. Everything that you put into a slide must, quote unquote, advance the narrative. So everything up there has to drive the message that you're trying to convey forward. Okay, so here is an example slide, again, from some of my educational work. This is from a talk I gave last year as well. Okay, there are a couple things here that are important. The first is that on this slide, my audience can instantly recognize where I am in my talk, right? This can be done through either a title. Here I'm using a title that says methods. You could also use a topic sentence. So on this slide itself, if you think about this that I'm showing you right now as a slide, I have a topic sentence here that helps orient you. We are on the second element of style, and I'm explaining what that is. Usually, if you notice, my topic sentences are typically about 2 lines long. Sometimes they're 3, but that's it. You can glance at it, you can read it, you can see where I'm at, what message I'm trying to convey, and then I move off of it. Okay, so either a title, okay, so usually when you're doing a technical presentation, like for MEEG102, you may just have a title that says, you know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, that's totally fine. Or if you're doing a technical brief, intro, methods, results, conclusions, okay, that's also appropriate. Or if you're doing a more generic talk that doesn't conform to one of those standards, you could do something like I'm doing for this lecture, which has a topic sentence there. Okay, so that's very important. Orient your audience. So the second thing that's going on is just the way that I'm organizing my information here with little chunks of text and breaks conveys to you this is a critical element. And you'll notice that the size of the font, okay, and the fact that I have small bullet points, these are not complete sentences here, helps you navigate, okay? All of this information is essential. I have a simple table over here with detailed data if you choose to look at that. And then again, with all of my text, I'm paying careful attention to sizing, to use of bullet points, okay, to help you navigate through this information. All right. Element of style number 3, you want to consciously choose your font and your background. So let's start with font. Typically with technical presentations, you want to use what is called a sans serif font. That means that there are no little feet, okay, on these, on your letters. So sans serif means without serif. A serif is the little feet. Okay, so I'm using a sans serif font right now. That is always a good choice. So good fonts presented in the font that their name is appearing in. So this is actually Calibri font, okay? Good fonts are Calibri, Helvetica, Arial, and I'm actually using something called Century Gothic. Century Gothic, I've made a conscious choice. That's kind of my style font. That's my signature font, if you want to call it that. I'm kind of a font nerd. I like this. It's very friendly, but also technically focused. I would say if you had to pick 2 of these, Helvetica or Arial are probably the most commonly used. They're also very clean. If I don't use Century Gothic, I'm usually using Arial. Calibri is a little tighter, so you'll notice that this is all 32-point font that's showing on this screen, and you know, Century Gothic is taking up a lot more room than these others, right? So even with the same font size, you're going to get displays that look a little bit different, but good fonts are all sans serif. Not so good fonts are things like Times New Roman. Okay, these are okay for print, but they don't usually display as well when you've got a lot of text on a slide. And here's the little serif. So these are serifed fonts. They have these little feet on them. And those feet take up space, okay? They're not as clean. That's generally why you don't use them as a presentation. That's not a hard rule. Some people will tell you, go ahead and use Times or Times New Roman, but usually not a good font. I personally, in presentations, used to use this font. I thought it was friendly to lecture in. I never used it in technical talks because it looks a little amateurish, but it's called American Typewriter. I would not advise this for technical talks. Also, it does have a serif, okay? And then obviously those crazy fonts, things like Broadway, Papyrus, okay, Lucia Sanskrit, all of these, okay, those are really not appropriate. Don't use them anywhere, okay? All right, so again, if I were to pick fonts that you guys should work with, Helvetica or Arial, Century Gothic, if you want to use that, cool, but just notice that there are some times when you'll have difficulty displaying, so sometimes it has a problem. If you're going to upload your fonts or upload your slides to Google Slides, there are sometimes some issues with Century Gothic displaying properly in Google Slides or cloud-based slide programs, okay? So that would be my only warning to you about using the font that I typically use. All right, slide background, okay? So that's the other big one. You want to choose a slide background and a style for your backgrounds that allows for maximum content with minimum distraction. I always used no background, okay? So absolutely nothing on there. It is a blank page that I am working from. I find that to be the best, okay? It gives you the maximum amount of space to work with. There are also no distractors. You can definitely do that, right? A nice clear white background is always a good choice, particularly if you are putting in a lot of graphical elements that are going to not make your slide boring. The only risk with a white background sometimes is visually it can be a little dull if you don't have a lot of images or something other than text to work with. Now, what you absolutely positively do not want to do is something like this, okay? Here is, again, one of many stupid types of PowerPoint backgrounds. This stinking green triangle thing that people like to use. Okay, the issue with this is that to try to put the same amount of content, excuse me, on this slide, okay, you wind up encroaching on the border here, so this is bleeding over into the border, which is not good. Here was an image that didn't have a neutral background to it, a transparent background, so it actually looks really cheesy and amateurish because it's cutting into that background. And you get a lot of this, okay? Your images for graphs will have this same effect. It's really, really ugly, okay? And then obviously, you know, this is shrunken, right? So this has to shrink in order to fit in what the working area of this slide is, which is much, much smaller than having a blank slide. So again, another reason why I hate these stupid template backgrounds. Okay, there is an option that I would recommend for engineers, for technical presentations, that has a background that has a kind of a different purpose, and that is a branded university or company affiliated background. I am going to give to you some templates that have been provided to us from the communications folks in engineering. You are welcome to use those templates. It is the official University of Delaware branding standards. These little dots and ovals and stuff in our blue and gold are actually standards that have been adopted by our communication group. Some presentations you're going to be required by your company or by your university to use this particular template background. I'm not going to do that to you for your MEEG102 presentation. If you choose to use a background like this, I will show you how to work with it in our online tutorial, but I'm not going to require it of you. My issues, and I do have some issues with using these types of backgrounds. Again, my favorite is just a blank background. You notice I don't use University of Delaware branded background. Although what that gives you is if you're giving a talk that's going to be very, very public and lots of people are going to be watching it outside of your institution, it does give you some space where they can recognize on each and every slide your institution or your particular brand. So here our brand is University of Delaware Engineering. They're seeing it on every single slide, okay? What I don't like about this particular layout, but most of these in general, is it winds up taking up a lot of space. So there's still wasted space at the top that I would typically be using for my topic sentence or my title for that slide, right? So there's still wasted space. You notice there's more branding down at the bottom on this particular slide deck. I'm going to give you lots of options if you choose to use this type of branding. And here there's more, you know, the department is branded down at the bottom. One thing that you definitely don't need to do, guys, this brand has it built in, this template has it built in, but these page numbers are kind of silly. There's really no reason to have them on a presentation, to be perfectly honest. Nobody's sitting there counting your number of slides. So I would say if you want to use this type of background, know that it's being done generally for branding purposes, and look for one that is brand consistent from your company or from your university that still gives you the maximum amount of real estate to work with. Okay, so that was font and also backgrounds. I now want to talk about slide layouts. So you want to mix up your slide layouts to reduce monotony. So let's look at something that would be very monotonous. So I'm going to pull up some text that is just some silly text. It's called Lorna Ipsum, which is a text that's used for graphical layouts. Okay, so this is completely meaningless fake Latin. But let's pretend for a second that I am giving a talk to you. And what I am doing is I'm talking out these points one by one. And then we go to the next slide, it's got a topic sentence, and I'm talking out another set of points one by one. Notice that in terms of the amount of content on the slide, this is okay, right? I'm only doing 3 bullet points. These are fairly short fragments. I've got a title. So chances are you can follow along with me. I'm also using animations, but the problem with this is if I go slide after slide after slide, let me go back here. If I go slide after slide after slide of just topic, sentence, bullet point, even if it's in digestible chunks, you're going to fall asleep, right? This is not very visually interesting. Okay, so a typical slide deck, what you want to do is you want to alter the layouts that you're showing your audience and give them a mixture of text and also graphics while also making the content digestible. Okay, so you want to give them a mix of information, but you also want to make sure that it's a bite-sized chunk for them. So here's another talk of mine, okay, and we can look at, this was a 10-minute talk. I have 12 slides, okay, so if you're looking at this, right, you can see kind of 3 common layouts. The first layout that I tend to use, and I do this a lot in my lectures as well, is a slide title or topic sentence, 3 or 4 bullet points running down the left or right side, and a graphic adjacent to it. Okay, that's a really nice layout. You get a little bit of everything, right? And I use that layout quite a lot. Now, again, you don't want to have slide after slide after slide that is just this layout. You'd like, you know, maybe there's 1 or 2 slides like that, but then you have something else that's mixed in there. So any kind of template that you're using is going to get redundant if you have 3 or 4 slides in a row that look like that. So watch out for that. Watch that you're mixing up. And usually the content in any technical talk is varied enough that your slide templates are naturally going to vary as well. Okay, so that's one that I use a lot, that topic sentence, and then the mix and match, half text, half graphic. The other one I use a lot is a graphic, just one big graphic in the middle of the screen, okay? And then I've also got side-by-side graphics or side-by-side graphic and table. That can be done as well. The difference between these two is you really want to make sure that if you're presenting side-by-side graphics, that you're not doubling the amount of content that you're throwing on there. This would be one complex graphic that you're conveying. You don't want to take a very complicated graphic and put it side by side with another very complicated graphic. These are generally simpler graphics or images that you're looking at, okay? All right. So this is a good time again to remind you of the rule of thumb about the amount of content per slide. We touched on this in last lecture. Basically what you want to have happen is you want the audience to look at what's on your screen. So when I flipped right over to this slide, the first thing you did was stopped listening to me and started reading what I put up on the screen. Okay, so you want to be able to look at this content as an audience member and grasp it within 5 to 10 seconds. Okay, that's about the amount of time that you want them to stop paying attention to you and read whatever is on the screen. No matter how compelling a lecturer you are, the audience is going to pause and they're going to look at what's on your screen for that amount of time. So it behooves you to design your slides so that the audience can look at that information, grasp it in 5 to 10 seconds, and then pay attention to you as you provide them with additional information. You yourself are going to stay on that slide for about a minute. So I expect to change over in about 15 seconds here, okay? So 30 to 90 seconds per slide is the range, 1 minute only. You've got a title or a topic sentence, and then you want 3 to 4 bullet points or 1 figure or table. Okay, that's about what you're looking for. Everything on here must be sized to read from a distance. That's probably one of the most common reasons why people apologize for the content that they're putting on the page. If you go back and remember our 10 commandments of presentations, one of them was thou shalt not present a page that requires a graphic that requires an apology. Biggest thing is things that are put on there that are too small. Okay, you can deviate a bit from this rule of thumb if you help your audience navigate. So I can present a little bit more content on my slides than 3 to 4 bullet points in 1 figure plus a topic sentence if I help my audience navigate through it. Again, every time I use an animation, they're going to look at it for 5 to 10 seconds before they come back to me, so I need to be conscious of that. Let's look at a couple examples of deviating. This is the first one. Okay, so this is another research project, okay, of mine, and first thing you see is methods. We're on the methods section, final survey instrument. Okay, so this is actually a table. I don't expect you to read this table. I expect you to recognize that this survey has 17 bullet points in it, okay, and maybe you're looking at specific items here. Now, I'm going to help you navigate through that instrument. Okay, I'm going to talk about the instrument design. Okay, there are 3 bullet points that I want to get across there, 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to talk about the reliability and validity of that instrument. And there are 3 more bullet points. So I have a lot of content here. If you think about what my rule of thumb was before, topic, title or topic sentence, and then 3 bullet points, I'm way over that, right? But in no given chunk am I giving you more than that amount of information, right? Here I'm just giving you the table. Then I start to have information that's necessary to understand how I came up with that table coming at you in bite-sized chunks. Okay, so if you're using animation strategically, you can put a little more content on the page. All right, second example of this, okay, this is a bit more graphical, okay, another bit of my academic research. Okay, so this is a flow chart, all right, that's helping guide the audience through how I'm developing a survey instrument. This should actually look very familiar to you. Okay, this is one of the papers that is part of the study that you guys are actually participating in. Okay, so I am presenting a lot of content in each of these bubbles, but I'm presenting it one at a time. I would pace myself. This might be a 90-second slide with 30 seconds devoted to each bit of that animation. All right, so 5th element of style, okay? So you want to thoughtfully use animation to keep the audience on pace with you during your presentations, okay? That is a really big thing. You want to animate the display of large sections of text to focus people's attention. So if I have one bullet point coming up at a time, I would hit the button for the bullet point to come up, and then I would talk about that bullet point. And only when I'm ready to discuss the next bullet point would the next bullet point come up. Okay, that keeps the audience with me and focused on what I'm saying and not just reading the screen. It also reduces monotony, especially if you have a lot of text coming at the audience. Okay, so a very text-heavy slide, you may want to consider having each bullet point come out at once. It's also good to animate labels, colors, and other clarifications that are being used on your slides. If you think about how I lecture, I do that a lot in my lectures, right? I'm pacing out the content that I'm giving you, and I'm pacing out the labels that I want to use to call attention. That keeps me from dancing around the slide like this with my cursor, or worse yet, my laser pointer. Again, that was another one of our 10 commandments, right? Okay, another point about animations. You want to use the simplest animations possible, okay? The simplest is appear, okay? You should, by default, be using appear. There are very, 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 very few instances where you're going to use an animation other than appear for text or for images. Every once in a while, you may want something to go away and you'll use disappear, but typically you're just using appear. Okay, so this is appear. I'll do it with minions. The minion just appeared. Just use appear. Okay, use nothing else. Okay, this is stupid. This checkerboard wipe. This is really stupid, whatever that was, and this is also stupid. Okay, what this conveys is, like, I just learned PowerPoint. Okay, so remember, we want just an appearance. Okay, you don't see me doing any of this in my talks, none of that. Okay, and also none of that. So keep it as just appear. All right, here's a great example, okay, of animations that are helping the audience understand a fairly complex topic. Okay, these are radar plots. You guys actually worked with a radar plot in MEEG102, focused on self-confidence. Okay, so this is communicating how we developed our survey based on existing surveys. So this content here came from this survey, and this content came from another survey, and it's sort of carving up that pie, which is very interesting. So that's a great use of animations and labels that are coming up along with text. Here's another one, okay? So I am presenting 2, okay? So I've got 3 animations here. One brings up one chart. I'd like to display these side by side because I'm trying to help the audience compare these 2 representations, a typical representation and our radar plot representation. Okay, but I don't have them come up at once because if I gave them all this information at once, right, that's a lot to deal with. I would have to use my cursor to kind of navigate it, right? So having it come up, boom, next, and then I want to show something on top of that, that next graphic comes up. So those are 3 graphs that are staged, animations that are staged to help the audience interpret what I'm showing. And my language is corresponding with the animations as well, right? Okay, oops, and there was one more. Look at that. All right. So our sixth element of style, guys, is incorporating mixed media whenever possible, okay? And you kind of do this when you vary the template that you're using, you vary your layout, okay? But back to a previous talk that I gave, I just want to be very explicit about what's going on here. So we have illustrations, we have flow charts, we have a bar chart here, okay? We have tables with highlighting, we've got pictures. So I'm pulling in a lot of different imagery and media, right, to help visually make my presentation interesting. Again, everything that you're pulling in, though, folks, needs to be essential. Okay, there is not an image in here that is not essential or drives the narrative forward in some way. Don't include imagery just because everything else on the page is text. Okay, word art or again, freaking question man. Okay, that kind of stuff really isn't helpful. Okay, so everything must be necessary. All right, so here's a great example of mixed imagery, okay, mixed media. So here I've got a topic sentence. I'm going to show you this. This is from the next lecture in MEEG102. We'll actually talk about finite element analysis and comparing that with experimental results. So what I've got here is actually an embedded video, so I'm going to play that. Okay, so there's a video. This is a Melissa and Doug nut that I'm crushing, okay, and we're going to watch it break. This is the force deformation curve, so I've got a graph here, okay, that's actually data from this experiment, and then I've got an image of the actual part itself, and you can see cracks are forming, right, and this thing's going to break. So it's kind of satisfying to watch. All right, but from a visual perspective, this slide is super interesting, right? Okay, it's got three different bits of media that I'm using, a video, a chart, and a photograph, and all of those are being tied together in one single very clean slide, okay? All right, so this brings us, folks, to our class participation activity, okay? So what you guys are going to do now is you are going to critique the technical presentation corresponding to your reviewer color, the same presentation that you worked with last workshop. You're going to critique that per the elements of style. Okay, so I'm less focused on this time the content and more on the stylistic elements. Okay, so again, those are the 6 elements of style. Please use the worksheet that has been provided to you for this class participation activity to critique the technical presentation corresponding to your reviewer color. Put me on pause and get going on that. All right, I'm going to critique the tree hugger technical presentation, which was my example from last time as well. Let's start with every slide having a purpose. And going through this slide deck, every slide definitely has a purpose. This was a 15-minute talk, 3-minute Q&A, 2-minute changeover. 21 slides, maybe I could sacrifice one. We talked about that last time. Probably the only slide here that I think doesn't have as much of a purpose is probably this project timeline, although that's debatable as well. Generally, at the end of the project, most people don't care how you accomplished it, okay? Or in the case of a lot of class projects, we've kept you on track. So we know exactly how much time we gave you for phase 1, phase 2, etc. Okay, so I might eliminate this slide as the only one that doesn't have a true purpose. So element number 2, slide content advances the narrative. This is absolutely true. This team did a fantastic job on that. Okay, so here's a great example of a slide that advances the narrative. They have a rather complicated concept selection process, so they really made that clear with a flow chart. The text that goes along with that flow chart is very simple, and it allows the reader to grasp it right away. Appropriate choice of text and background. So they did use a template. You'll notice their template, their version that they're using, which you guys have this version as well, is very clean. It has no bar at the top. Okay, so they actually have a little more real estate to work with there, but they did use a UD branded template. Their title slide and actually their acknowledgement slides are on a different solid blue background. And that's totally fine as well. Okay, their text was chosen to go with this. It's actually the same text that's part of the logo here. It's, I believe it's Helvetica, but it's a nice sans serif font and very clean, okay? Element number 4, different slide layouts reduce monotony. They definitely did a good job of that. You can just scan through this slide deck and see a lot of different layouts that are being used. They're not repeating the same layout a lot. They also went ahead and put a physical demo in here too, which really helped. Thoughtful use of animation. They definitely did this in most instances, but there were a couple slides. So when you're reviewing you're critiquing your presentation that corresponds to your reviewer color, please pay attention to use of animations. This team actually had a few slides that could have used animations. One was this path forward where they presented all of this text at once, which they could have it come up in 2 sections. I'll show you how to do that. The other was design validation. They really could have kind of highlighted, this is a complicated table here, your design validation table. They probably could have had highlighting text boxes or something like that come up that actually point to something rather than having a lot of text over here. So there are a couple instances where it probably would have been beneficial to have some animation that they didn't have. All right, element number 6, use of mixed media. They definitely did this again. This is a good place to highlight that they actually demonstrated their prototype right around here, which was very helpful as well. So they took a physical pause from the slides, they blanked the screen, and then they actually showed their prototype and did a demo. So that's great. All right. So with that, folks, we're going to start wrapping this up. I want to talk about Microsoft PowerPoint, and then I'm going to introduce your formative. So Microsoft PowerPoint is by far and away the most common software for technical presentations. By default, unless instructed otherwise for some odd reason, you should use PowerPoint. It is the standard, okay? There's no question about that. There are a couple other softwares. The other two that are somewhat, I wouldn't even say they're common. They're not common, but you will encounter people who use them and swear by them. Prezi is one, Keynote is the other. Keynote is kind of like an off-brand PowerPoint that comes with your Mac. Don't use it. Prezi is kind of a different philosophy. There's some artists and designers that swear by it. You sort of create this like landscape that has some images and you flip back and forth between it, or you navigate the landscape. I always get motion sick when I see people using Prezi. I don't think it's particularly intuitive in terms of how to incorporate graphics. I don't know. It annoys me when people use Prezi, to be honest. So PowerPoint is really the way to go, and that'll be the standard for your time here at Delaware. So again, PowerPoint meets audience expectations. Most of the time, your audience is expecting a PowerPoint talk when you're presenting, so much so that it may be interchangeable. You know, a slide presentation is called a PowerPoint presentation, right? It's sort of like Kleenex and tissues. So you use PowerPoint. PowerPoint allows you to easily embed text, images, videos, graphs, and animations. We'll go over more of that in the video tutorial that I'm going to post. It creates reasonable file sizes. You can actually compress them so that your files aren't huge. The files are very portable. I could give you my PowerPoint and you could pull it up on your PowerPoint and it would be pretty good, okay? It's also the software behind Google Slides, which is the cloud version of PowerPoint. So there is some loss of functionality between PowerPoint that's installed on your desktop and Google Slides, but it's pretty much there. There's enough of a difference though that it's worth checking. So if you create your presentation in PowerPoint on your home computer and then you upload it to Slides and are sharing it with your teammates, it's worth checking every single slide, every single animation, and the text. A lot of times the fonts get a little funny and the animations get funny in Google Slides. So you should never do a presentation without running through your presentation and making sure on the device that you're using that your presentation is showing up correctly, okay? All right, so more coming your way on how to use PowerPoint, how to make your presentations look as nifty as mine with a Google or a YouTube tutorial on PowerPoint. All right, this brings us, folks, to our formative assignment. So your formative assignment is actually designed to give you a jump start on the presentation that you'll be giving next week in MEEG102. Formative assignment number 22 involves creating slides for your MEEG102 presentation. Here's how it's going to work, okay? You're going to consult with your teammates in MEEG102, your teammates for your design project, and you're going to divvy up the slides. So you're going to say, okay, you, Amy, are going to take slides, the title slide through the beginning of the method section. You, Bill, are going to take the second method slide through the results, and you, Carolyn, are going to take the conclusions, the path forward, and the acknowledgement slide, okay? So divide it up. It is, again, what are we doing? 12-minute presentation. No, I'm sorry, 10-minute, excuse me. 10-minute presentation, so you're probably going to have about 12 slides. So if you have 3 people on your team, that would be 4 slides approximately per person. If you have 4 people on your team, it would be 3 slides per person. Give everybody an assignment. Okay, if your teammates are flaking on you for some reason and they are not doing their share of the work, please just do 3 or 4 slides. I don't expect the full presentation to be submitted. Every individual is going to give 3 or 4 unique slides. The goal is that if you have a well-functioning team, which is the majority of the folks in the class, thank God, okay, that you will have a rough draft by the end of formative assignment number 22 of your actual presentation for MEEG102. Okay, so what you do need to do as a group, though, is in addition to dividing up the work, okay, 3 to 4 slides per team member, you need to agree on your formatting details. So what text are you using? What background are you using? Okay, you want to have a consistent style across all of those slides, right? So when you assemble them at the end for MEEG102, you should do that well in advance. Okay, so you should take what you're doing here for the formative assignment. You should then merge it together. You should fix all the animations, make sure you're using consistent formatting, and rehearse as a team. But it'll be an easier process if you agree up front what standards you're going to use. If you are not in MEEG102, there's an example design report provided. You are going to create 3 slides from that example design report, and I'll tell you exactly which 3 slides. Actually, I'll give you the option to do which 3 slides, but it can't be the title slide or the conclusion slide, okay? All right, so that's your formative assignment. That'll be posted to Canvas. Okay, guys, that sort of wraps up our workshop today. Formative assignments 21 due 2 p.m. Wednesday, May 6th, 22, which is going to be, you are pretty much going to have a draft done of your MEEG102 presentation due 2 p.m. Monday, May 11th. Required reading from today is none. Okay, summative assignment drafts are being graded. Would love to see you during discussion. And again, no question man, please. If you want to meme question man and send me a meme of question man, I would happily accept that. Okay, that or the Microsoft PowerPoint borders, I would take memes of either one of those. All right, guys, thank you very much, and see you soon.